Hello, everyone. In this podcast, we delve into the richness of intercultural encounters in multicultural Queensland and explore the art of navigating these diverse interactions with respect and understanding. Join us as we share captivating stories and insights from individuals who have embraced and celebrated the differences, fostering meaningful connections with people from various backgrounds. We will also provide practical tips and strategies for effectively handling intellectual encounters, overcoming cultural barriers, and promoting harmony in our diverse community. Together, let's learn how to build bridges and strengthen the fabric of multicultural Queensland through meaningful intercultural exchanges. To start the podcast today, I will just ask the panel to introduce themselves.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Apana Hebbani. I am a senior lecturer at the University of Queensland in the School of Communication and Arts. And I'm originally from India, but I've been out of India for the last 31 years. Most of my time has been living in the US and then in Australia.
Thank you, Apana. Dr. Valeria?
Okay, so hi everyone, really nice to be here. So I'm Dr. Valeria Sinkeviciute. I'm a lecturer in the School of Languages and Cultures at the University of Queensland, and mostly in my research and teaching I deal with social interaction, that is conversations that people have in their daily lives. So I'm originally from Lithuania, a small country in Eastern Europe, but then I spent a lot of time in other places, such as studying in Spain, in Canada, and also in Belgium. And well, now I've been here in Australia for more than 6 years, and this is the place that I call home.
Awesome. Nice to meet you. Anna?
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you here. I'm Anna Rolandsen. I am working at ECTQ as the Manager for Community Development Policy and Advocacy. And I'm Australian born. My mother came here from Britain at the age of 21. And on my father's side, our ancestry is Danish. However, I've worked in the multicultural sector for over a decade and spent a bit of time living in Uganda and Cambodia. Have a very strong appreciation for multicultural community.
Okay, welcome everybody. And today we're going to start off with sharing personal interactional encounters we've had in Queensland, and basically how they impacted our perspective on cultural connections. Yes, Dr. Apana.
Myself. So I moved to Queensland in 2006. That's, do the math, how many years ago that was. And I moved from the US to Australia in 2004. And I lived in New South Wales for 2 years, but I'm now a Maroon supporter. Let me put that out. But when I moved from New South Wales to Queensland, people in New South Wales says, "Oh my gosh, are you sure you want to do that?" Queensland didn't have that much of a reputation as being a multicultural state. But hand on my heart, since I've moved to Queensland, I've not experienced any negative encounters. There may have been a few encounters based on assumptions or lack of knowledge about me or who I look like, or perhaps the dress that I wear, because I very often love to wear a 6-yard sari and a bindi on my forehead, and I feel comfortable in that. And I might have had a few people look at me, gaze at me, as in, where are you from? From which planet have you come from? Or people might make an assumption that I am a recent speaker of English, again, based on visible difference or me looking Indian or looking like I've got brown skin. But I don't put that down as a negative interaction per se. I think it's more basing communication going off of popular or widely known stereotypes.
Awesome. And Valeria, what's your experience?
Yeah, so well, I think I've spent like most of my life probably in the some kind of intercultural environment. Even like when I was living in my country, I was raised as a bilingual and in a very kind of this multicultural environment. So it's I guess there was nothing in particular that I think would surprise me here, like in Queensland and Australia in general. Some of the examples, and I think it's kind of both, that it gives me the idea that even though we come from very many different backgrounds and I communicate with people from different backgrounds, we have a lot of things in common. And sometimes we don't really realize that. So a couple of examples probably would be some of my conversations with students. And I remember that was probably last year before the Lunar New Year, like at the end of January, or maybe it was like 2 years ago when people couldn't travel. And I remember we had the meetings with my master's students, and to me, it was kind of just a normal thing to say, oh, okay, so now it's going to be like a tiger year. And they, like part of the Chinese students, they got very kind of surprised as in, wow, like, you know, this information about our culture. And then I had students that were not from the Chinese cultural background. They were surprised in terms of, how do you know that? Like, isn't that the, Asian thing? And to me, that was a kind of realization that, well, it's not, because in my cultural background, at least maybe it's my family thing, we do speak about month signs, but we also speak about the years. So I would know that. So that was something that kind of made me realize that we come from very different cultural backgrounds, very different upbringing, but then we have those things that are very in common, as well as it goes for some other things, like seeing people, at the, I don't know, restaurants that I would have meals with them, and then they would touch some food and it would be hot, and they would immediately kind of put their fingers to the tip of their ear. And that to me is like so normal, because we say like, oh, if you burn yourself, you have to do that because that's kind of makes it feel better. So I was shocked that it exists somewhere else. So that's kind of is like show that, yes, we're similar, which is like a very great feeling. I guess something that shows that we are different, because a lot of conversations that we have probably have that, I don't know, taste as well. When in the probably first years, what I noticed is if I normally, like in December, I would go to Europe to visit my family. And then in conversation, people would say, oh, okay, what do you have like for Christmas? What are you going to do? And then I would say like, oh, I'm going to like to Europe. And immediately the next kind of response or like term that people would take was, oh, so you're going back home. And that part for me was like, I think I would just hesitate and I would not exactly kind of know how to take it. And I believe like my response would be, no, this is home. I'm not going back anywhere because I'm from here. So it's kind of made me also feel probably a little bit like sad that people would just assume that then you're not here, like you don't belong here, because with that kind of wording, as in you're going back home. So, but I feel like a lot of people have had, those encounters. It's just like what happens every day, I guess, of our lives. And hopefully, we will get to some tips of how to maybe prevent those. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. I know Anna touched a bit on hers, but we'd love to hear a little bit more.
Yeah, so I grew up in Southside, and I'm fortunate to say that from a young age, in my neighbourhood, we had a lot of different cultural groups as neighbours, and I went to school with people from different cultures. It's interesting, Dr. Valeria, that you mentioned the Chinese culture, because I learnt Chinese through school. We learned all about the Lunar New Year's and different animals represented throughout there. So I guess I've I feel fortunate that in the community that I grew up in, but I think particularly in my family, there was an appreciation for the beauty in different cultures. And I recognise that not everybody has had that experience who have grown up in Brisbane or in Queensland. I think for me personally, part of that came through faith-based that I was a part of as well. We had a lot of different cultures in our faith groups, and that was very much celebrated and recognised as so valuable and beautiful. And I think it's so helpful to be in close proximity to people from different backgrounds and different cultures, because it's only through those conversations with individual people that you can appreciate the beauty and the understanding and the oneness that we share, as well as the uniqueness and the value in that. So I think that proximity is a really important thing to help break down different stereotypes that get perpetuated.
Ah, okay. So I guess this boils down back to because we've all had multicultural encounters by virtue of just living in Queensland, because it's a multicultural community. It'd be very rare unless if you are like some sort of isolated. So in your experience, what are some of the misunderstandings or challenges that can arise in intercultural encounters, and how do you suggest navigating them effectively?
I think as human beings, when you meet someone new, the first thing you do is kind of in your mind scan the person out. Is this person like me? Is this person not like me? And sometimes people make assumptions based on visible difference. Like, oh my God, this person does not look like me. So where is this person from? I want more information. I want to gather more information about who is this person. And sometimes we make judgments about the other person based upon what we see or the differences that we see, whether it's skin color or dress. But then we're also making judgments on language. If this person is proficient in English, not proficient in English. And some people unfortunately make a call on whether you as a person are inferior or superior based upon language, even though this other person might speak 6 other languages fluently and you might just speak 1. But those are some of the challenges and misunderstandings that can arise in an intercultural interaction, especially meeting someone for the first time. And I think a big part of that misunderstanding is when one is afraid of asking questions, or one is afraid to understand other cultures or cultural differences, or they don't know how to go about doing that politely without offending the other person. That then sets up the rest of the encounter and how that unfolds.
Yeah, I love that you are talking about, conversations and about, this polite thing, because that is, exactly what I've been doing, as part of my research, but also just as a human being. And it's very interesting that when we talk about, or like when, people hear the word misunderstanding, and in the minds, I think, like of many people, and at least from my experience, when I talk to either students or around, it's the idea that, oh, you might not understand particular word. So, and that conversations like, misunderstanding happen in conversations between people who use particular language as their first language, and then those who use their foreign language. When we'll look at actually what happens in interactions, and a lot of research has actually looked at those, it's not those misunderstandings that have its source as a particular word that are predominant, but it's more in relation to something cultural, something social, or something pragmatic. So understanding of the context, understanding of our relationships. So a number of these things relate to, as the partner said, like this idea of like, okay, so what is polite? You know, how do we make something that might then make us, you know, seem rude or not rude? Because politeness is so different, you know, just across the cultures. And it's very interesting. I have like kind of two examples in relation to this kind of directness and indirectness, like how do we do things with language? And if we look at the just general, like, you know, if we talk about English, there is a lot of this tendency to be indirect. So kind of this conventional indirect, you know, saying like asking questions for could you, would you, etc. So in many different situations. So I've had a number of emails and from different people, even from the locals, so like, you know, Anglo-Australians. So that would say something like, I request you to see me, you know, some being kind of very direct, or, you know, going from like, oh, you know, hi, Valeria, you know, the things that kind of sometimes would make me feel a little bit, okay, so now there is some kind of difference. So people might be translating things from their language where the more direct way of saying things is totally fine, that is polite, or people might not necessarily orient to a particular type of relationship. Because for me, you know, it might be, okay, this is a more distant relationship, but for other people, it would be, okay, we are more close, like there. So, and this is kind of where, kind of the example where I would expect something to be more indirect, and then I would get something direct. But then I also have examples from my personal life, kind of that goes vice versa. So, and I've, so in general, like if I have closer relationship with people, so close friends, I would become more direct. So instead of, you know, saying, could you pass me something? I would actually say, just give me that. And I've had a number of Australians then at some point, you know, comment on that and saying like, wow, you are too direct. You're so straightforward. You know, you make us like you know, kind of impose upon us like so much. And it was very kind of that type of situation led to amazing discussions, because I was trying to figure out, okay, so where I'm taking this from. And then I would think about, okay, yeah, it's a relationship. So that relationship dimension, knowing, you know, who we are to each other seems to be very important. And where for me, you know, the kind of expectation, well, the cultural expectation that is seen through the language would be, I can be more direct. It seemed like to the people that I was communicating with, the level of indirectness still persisted. So they would not expect that it has to be like so direct. And then that kind of leads to people's perceptions of like, oh, that might be too rude, you know, and that's where the conversations start, which, you know, it's great to have those conversations because that's kind of enriched then our, I don't know, kind of our life and the personal and cultural development. So I really enjoy those.
I totally agree with what you've both said, because I think it comes back again to what I was saying before about proximity. If we're in close proximity to people, we can have those conversations and we can be curious about why does this particular way of asking for something or saying something feel like it's, you know, not polite to you, or what is it about this other way of saying things feels polite to you. And I think it's important to be curious, because as Dr. Apana said, we make very quick judgments about people when we first meet them. And I think it's really important for us as individuals and as a society to remember to stay curious and to remember that we have all these underlying assumptions that we're making about people which may not be true. And if we can be, I guess, confident enough in ourselves to ask a question and to have a conversation with someone to explore further what it is about them or their way of being, about their values, beliefs, about their behaviours, that is, you know, seemingly different on a surface level, and maybe come to understand that underneath it all, it's actually very similar, but we express it different ways. So yeah, I think that relationship and being able to have those conversations is so important, because I have definitely seen a lot of people make those assumptions at first and say things that are quite offensive to people at first, and then to be able to go through a conversation and come to an understanding of why those things are the way they are, why they're said a particular way, can actually bring people together in quite a stronger way after the said.
So whenever I have such encounters, if I put a gold coin into a jar, for every time someone asks me, oh, I speak English so well, or how many years have you been speaking English, I'd be a billionaire. Because a number of times, oh, you speak English really well. So what's the assumption that they're making, that I'm a new speaker of the English language, and I use that as an opportunity to educate the other person about maybe they've gone based off the one experience that they've had speaking to someone else from India, or they're making a judgment based upon what they've seen or they hear from the media or from movies maybe. And then I take it upon myself to educate them. Actually, I've done all my education, all my schooling since kindergarten in English. So practically English is my first language, even though I speak 5 other Indian languages quite fluently. I think first, primarily in English. So I consider English to be my primary language of communication. And that generally, I think that's some of the strategies that one can take, is to educate and inform the other person to make that person more comfortable or more knowledgeable about other cultures. So there's definitely steps that can be taken to bridge the intercultural divide.
Okay. So with this, how can we safely and directly, communicate boundaries? Because I'm getting, from what all 3 of you spoke about, it's in most environments, we don't have enough time to build that trust or friendship. It's sometimes brief encounters, but how are we able to safely, to communicate our boundaries?
I'd say no one should hesitate to ask a question. And the way to do that politely, like Valeria said, I would love to know more about. Okay, so that's extending a hand to say, I would love to learn more about your particular culture or whatever demographic variable it is. I think that's one thing, and which boils down to respecting difference. I think that is the key concept everyone should have, and that should inform all our communication and our behaviors. And another way to build that intercultural understanding is something very simple. Talk to your neighbors. Make an effort to know someone who is from another culture in your neighborhood, for example. So when you do see that difference, you've got a choice to accept it or run from it. And I advocate obviously accepting it and learning more, because Queensland is an extremely multicultural state based upon which LGA you live in. And very often that helps create a sense of belonging. And like Valeria said, that sense of home and acceptance and inclusion comes from talking and wanting to learn more, because it primarily, in my opinion, does come back to a lack of knowledge more than anything else. And fear and anxiety do not help bridge intercultural encounters. Very often communication is the best tool. And I hand on my heart feel that by and large, most people, regardless of where they want to come from, we want to learn to get along with others. But assumptions and apprehension can be one of the biggest barriers.
Wow. Yeah, I think it's so interesting. I mean, I love that, you know, you said, talked about the things in relation to, you know, how much, you know, people asked you about your accent, or, you know, like how many times, you know, people would ask you, where are you from? And that is definitely something, you know, the particular type of question, you know, we have like, where are you from? And then we have a variety now, because people try to avoid that question, where is your accent from? So we get into that one. And some time ago, because I was getting quite a number of those questions, I started making kind of my own repository of those, like what kind of interactions they happened. And I think this is like the very important thing, because it's not just about the question, like the question is wrong, because there are so many situations where it would be the right question, and people have to ask them, and they would be expected to ask them. And but then I really love that idea of people getting interested and actually like asking questions, not just, you know, oh, where are you from, but actually like, tell me more about your culture. And I think this is where I have the or like that question becomes problematic, and where I would definitely, one of the kind of, well, whether it's a practical tip, like saying, you know, mind your language. And that is in relation to why are you asking a particular question, or why are you saying a particular thing in relation to someone else's, you know, background, or someone else's job, or someone else's, you know, family, etc. Like, what is the purpose of this? Like, trying to think about that, because in many situations, and this is what I've been through, so that's kind of my personal experience, we are like, you know, in a random context talking about, you know, either with people whom you have already met a little bit, or it's the first time when you have the encounter with them. And out of nowhere, they just tell you or ask you a question, oh, where is your accent from? And then it kind of doesn't really link to the topic. So that would be kind of the thing. If it's relevant to the topic, sure, you know, go ahead and ask it, because then there would be follow-up questions. But most of those interactions, if you give them the answer, and that's all. We don't talk about your culture. We don't talk about, you know, oh, I've never been to that place, so can you tell me more? It's just like the conversation stopper in a way. And then that's kind of where the reason is, like, you know, I would say, like, why are people asking this? So thinking about that would probably be one of the practical tips, even though that's a huge thing. And the other one, I guess, like, yeah, if we're talking like, you know, how to navigate those things, and again, from my perspective, where we are looking at very details in interaction, and how, you know, if you already, you know, said something, and people do not mostly have bad intentions. Like, they don't do that in order to offend someone or in order to make someone feel bad. But how do we know whether something is not going well? And that is where we definitely say, you know, look at people's reactions, look at people's responses. And as part of those responses is the silence. And silence up to, you know, probably 1 second, which seems to be very tiny, but that silence is problematic. So look at people's, you know, facial expression if you're like face to face with them, and noticing those things might actually give you an idea, okay, so that might have offended someone, or someone, you know, it might have been hurtful to them. Like, why aren't they just immediately, you know, giving you the answer, for instance, of that? And I mean, those are the things that they're so huge, so it's like just impossible, you know, to give like 1, 2, 3 tips, and this is where all your life, all your intercultural encounters will be amazing. So that's definitely not the case, but we're trying to well, explore those, and I'm going to present like one of the webinars as part of the Multicultural Queensland month in a couple of weeks, and we're going to go into detail, you know, like, okay, so how the conversations actually work, and where we can notice the things, because it's a lot about observation, I think, as well.
I really like what you're saying about observing people's body language, facial expressions. I think all of that is so important. And, you know, when you talk about how you safely maintain boundaries, I think it is about, you know, observing and navigating those spaces, and being aware that people's face and body language will tell you a lot about, is this a safe space or not? And I guess along those lines, I think in order to have the conversations that we need to have, and ask the questions we need to ask, we also need to be mindful of our body language and things. And, you know, when you ask a question with a smile, it's going to be taken in a very different way than if you ask that same question with a very straight face. And things like that, I think it sounds like a tiny thing, but it can actually have quite a big impact in the way that those conversations go and in the way that the questions you're asking are perceived. And so, I think in order to safely navigate this, we need to be brave enough to have difficult conversations and ask difficult questions, and to make sure that we're doing that in a respectful, safe and encouraging way with the people that we're with in intercultural space. And to me, that is by, maintaining an open body language, smiling and encouraging people throughout the conversation as well, and valuing what it is that they are adding to the conversation, or what it is that they're sharing, and acknowledging the importance of people's lived experience and people's different backgrounds.
Okay, actually some very awesome points there with Apana talking about her, the neighbors, getting in touch and connecting with, the people who are close to you, and not just close to you in family aspect, but in vicinity, so that you can better understand your community. And with Valeria also touching on studying body language, facial expressions, and Anna also touched on that as well. And the one I liked the most was being brave to ask, the difficult questions by Anna as well. But the other thing I just want to find out, is also with all these experiences, because clearly we all do have them, what valuable lessons have you learned through engaging with diverse communities, and how have they enriched your understanding of cultural connections?
I think, as I've mentioned before, I think the lesson is deep inside. We are all good human beings. No one wants to purposefully upset anyone. But as long as you realize and people stop placing people in categories of like us, not like us, but realize that we're all in this world together. Isn't that a song? We're all in this together.
We are the world.
And that it doesn't really matter where we come from, but that we're all richer as a result of these interactions. And you learn something new, and you might realize that people have more similarities than differences. So even though we might navigate towards first finding difference, over time, as you get to know the person, you realize that you have a lot more in common with this person from this other culture than there's difference. So people's values, people's beliefs might be similar, even though externally we might look different, or whatever is visible might be different, but deep down inside, we're all the same, and we actually want to get along.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I just agree with everything. So just putting additional things, like for me, probably the most kind of valuable lessons is this, the part kind of when you realize that with people that you think are similar to you for whatever reason, that they come from similar background, or they look like you, or they have, a profession similar to yours. So many very different aspects, which is also part of the cultures, just more of the microcultures. When you realize that when you have conversations with them, that you might actually not be that similar to them. And with people whom just because we do that automatically, we put people into particular boxes, categories. It's just like part of how we make sense of the world. So, and then when you start actually getting to know those people, you just realize, wow, well, they are actually very similar. And even though you would say like, oh, I would never expect that. So those kind of valuable lessons, like not to make this kind of assumptions ahead of us, like of our interactions. And yeah, probably we would figure out many more things as in we have much more in common that we think that we might not. And then hopefully that would make us kind of, or make it easier for us, or give us a little bit of the tools to navigate, you know, like the further interactions, because there will always be some kind of, you know, misunderstanding with that. But yeah, so kind of keeping here an open mind would be very helpful.
Absolutely, I agree with what you both said. And for me personally, I feel that my world has become so much more enriched the more that I have been involved in different multicultural communities and connected with different people from different backgrounds, because you do recognize that there are so many things that we have in common, and there are these beautiful differences. And I think just to continue to appreciate the beauty in the different ways that people express themselves, and the different values that they have, and that we all share in some ways, and others that are different. There's so much beauty in it. And I think because of the world we live in being a challenging world, it's so important to look at the beauty in what we have around us. And I personally am very grateful to live in a place where there is so much cultural diversity, and to be able to see the differences that people can bring and the contributions that we can have because of the differences and because of the different cultural communities who have come to Queensland.
Yeah, I think we need to be more acceptable of cultural difference and let go of our ethnocentric thinking to bring about more inclusion, and not make any judgments on which culture is superior or which isn't. And I think that really can build better intercultural understanding when we let go of those ethnocentric thoughts and judgments that we make.
All right. So with the Multicultural Queensland Month and all the efforts that we see going around in our state and most of Australia, basically there's an effort to try and strive for a better intercultural connections, which is a very good effort. And you guys have really dropped in some good tips and approaches on trying to see how individuals can adopt or foster positive and respectful encounters. And yeah, I was really enriched by that. But taking it a step further, how can we get to a point or start cultivating like right now we're discussing tips because obviously our brains have we are coming from different places, and we are coming to, you know, encountering all this new stuff. But then we are having kids here, and we are building homes and continuing our families, and so that we don't always have to continue repeating the cycle, how do we, you know, make sure that these structures are carried forward or are somehow ingrained in our, let's say, sometimes it could be curriculum, sometimes it could be I don't know, like how people get into Australia and learn English as an offer, you know, things like that. What are those strategies? How could those look like for a longer benefit and time for results?
I think it all starts from the home. I think it starts from your system around you and what you're exposed to. So if you're exposed to difference early on, you might be more acceptable of difference. But if you'd never seen anyone who's different, what do you go off of? You go off of by what the media shows, what the media tells you. If you hadn't met anyone from a particular culture, where do you know in the first interaction, how do you handle this person? How do you think, what do you make of this person? You go back to what the media shows or depicts, or what someone else told you about this particular community. And I think that's why learning has to start at home, from the parents, and from school. And schools are increasingly diverse. The school population is, again, I'm talking about in Southeast Queensland, maybe not so much in rural Queensland, but that change will slowly happen. And if we see the difference that we want to see, even on TV, I think that plays a huge role in how we can make Queensland more harmonious, or we can improve inclusion across generations. So for example, a couple of years ago, I traveled out west to the town of St. George. That's a few hours west of here. And we walked into this small town because we needed a cup of coffee. And it was a town of maybe, I think, 100 or 150 people. And we walked in, and boy, did eyes turn. Like, who are these people? Where have you come from? And every move that we made was watched by the locals, predominantly Caucasian Australians who were, I'm guessing, into farming or had large properties. And we took that, again, I took that as an opportunity to talk to the people on the table next to me, or, oh, where are you from? What are you doing in town? And having a great discussion. But that's just for me and my generation. But when I look at my children who have done all their schooling in Australia, I think the schooling system has become quite inclusive in many ways, and increasingly so, because I've got a lot of friends who are school teachers, and I see over time how schools are becoming more inclusive, more diverse, more understanding of difference, more inclusive in the way curriculum is delivered. And I think that's all a very, very positive thing. The government has done a lot to facilitate multiculturalism in our state. Of course, you'd have minor incidents in every state or city. You can't ever stop that. But all in all, I think you have to build that sense of belonging. And that comes from home. And I again come back to the important role that neighborhood plays.
Yeah. So, I mean, kind of, yeah, to pick up on that idea of, like, you know, sense of belonging and the kind of building a more harmonious community that seems like a lot of us striving for. So that is what we're doing. And I think it is very important that while, you know, going on to that mission, not to lose our diversity. So and this is where kind of it comes, the reality that is in Queensland, that is, you know, in Australia now with the census data. And I think that what was a very great discussion last year's podcast. And then one of the guests said that now multicultural Queensland and multicultural Australia, that's the majority. So that is what it is. And it's kind of, you know, it comes with a lot of things. I mean, there are so many cultural festivals, and that is where kind of people get the opportunity to go and taste other people's food and get to the cinema. So it's kind of the more of a broader kind of the cultural thing. What is also important is the language thing. So part of that diversity is a lot of people are not just multicultural, but they are multilingual. And that's kind of the importance of that. And I think this is where the education and the schooling system can make a huge contribution by having more languages being there, and not just, in the last years it being elective, like optional, but actually making it, a part of that. As in many other countries in the world, you don't just learn your own language, but you also have a foreign language, whatever it is, and you kind of continue that. And we see really great numbers of students at the university that want to learn a new language. And then, we just had the UQ open days, and people come and they, ask us, oh, can I start, from zero? Is it allowed? I'm like, of course. Most of the people, they come and they start learning a language from zero, because with language, you get to know the culture as well. So it's kind of part of that. So, my kind of, probably the take, and obviously being a linguist, would that, do not, underestimate the power of language that it plays in this multicultural society, because it's, and part of that, and I think it's kind of embracing the multicultural and multilingual social reality that we have in Queensland and we have in Australia, definitely gives us then a very good chance in order to provide a much better kind of sense of belonging for everyone in this very diverse community.
Yeah, I again totally agree with everything that's been said, and just want to I guess reinforce that I too think that it would be really beneficial to continue increasing within the school curriculum a bit more around the recognition of our history, of the privilege that a lot of I guess white Australians have had, and the effects that has had on other cultures, in order to acknowledge the challenges that we face. And I too agree that in the home is such an important place to have some of these difficult conversations, because at least in the home you can ask questions and have difficult conversations in a safe space, and perhaps have some discussion that would lead to an understanding of why there are these differences and what are some of the reasons behind difference. And I think because we now live in a global village, that is why, as you were saying, language is so important, and it is so beneficial to learn multiple languages, and because of the world we live in, you have access to contact with people from all over the world in multiple languages now. So why wouldn't you take a hold of that and gain from that and benefit from that? And apart from learning our language, I think we also need to think about the language that we use when we talk in intercultural settings, and when we talk about other cultural groups, because we all know that language and what the words we use, and that has such a big impact. And I think in terms of thinking about the next generation, I would love it to build the language that the next generation has to be able to discuss these things, and also just the skill of being able to have a difficult conversation on topics like this, because it is a skill and it's not something that gets just picked up easily. So yeah, I think building the language and the skill to have difficult discussions and to explore what it is that's behind all of these things, and the history and the world that we live in now.
Oh, thank you guys. That was pretty awesome. And before we go, I'm just going to ask if any of you have anything else to add. Any takers?
I probably would just say that people, really need to enjoy this multicultural, multilingual environment and just the reality that we have here. And because it's every day, that we have intercultural encounters on many different levels, and we might not even realize that, but we do. And that's where we always have to be, you know, mindful of our language and just enjoy that richness that is here, that we have it in Queensland and in Australia, and that might not be the reality of other people. So just really enjoying that and and being proud to be part of that.
And there's also the opportunity to learn about other cultures without leaving Queensland. So make the most of it rather than running away from it.
Yeah, totally agree. Very grateful to be in a place where we do have so many cultures and people in this area, and agree that we should appreciate it and celebrate it more than 1 month a year.
And food and music really brings people together and lessens that difference. So try listening to different music or eat a cuisine that you're not familiar with. And that's a good place to start, I'd say.
I love the food part and the dancing. Thank you so much, guys, for sitting for this podcast. And it was really awesome having you. And you literally smashed out all the good questions, and I had to be creative at the end. But I totally thank you so much for sitting in, and I'm excited about this. Can't wait to take it out to the world.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rio.
Thank you, guys.
Lovely meeting you, Anna and Valeria.